Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Well, for those that don't know me, I'm Mike Dell from Blubrry and now Guest Match Pro. It's our new thing. But anyway, today we're going to talk about podcast distribution. Basically, making sure you're in the right places to get your podcast out there in front of your listeners. And I guess I need the little gizmo here. All right, so it's a couple of types of podcast apps. Not a lot of people categorize them this way, but I do. There's podcast apps that are strictly podcast apps, and that's all they do. And then there's podcast apps that have added podcasting to something else that they're doing. So like Spotify, I don't have a whole list here. These are actual podcast apps. Apple, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anything that is just strictly podcasting. Those are traditional RSS-based podcast apps, and there's nothing bad about the other ones. It's great for discovery. One of the things that us traditionalists have been around, I've been doing this for 20 years, and RSS is freedom. There's nobody that can tell you can't do this because you have an RSS feed, so people can listen to that or watch it. If you're doing video, no problem. Then you got the ones that added podcasting, Spotify being the biggest one. There's iHeart, Pandora, YouTube, Amazon, all that stuff that it does other things, but also added podcasting. And there's value in being in those. Because say you got like iHeartRadio, somebody listens to a radio station on iHeartRadio, and they're messing around in the app, and they run across your podcast. They might not listen to it in iHeart, but then now they know it exists. So then they can go to whatever app they listen on and find your show. And the key to finding your show is to be in one of these two, or I begrudgingly say three, because I'm not particularly a fan of Spotify, but whatever. But Apple Podcasts and Podcast Index. Most people haven't heard of Podcast Index. A lot of podcast companies, including ours, automatically submit you to that directory. But like podcast apps, the independent apps that are out there, they take their catalog from Apple or Index, and in some cases both. Like I could think of a couple that have both. You can look for shows on either index. And if you're in those, you're probably in about 120 places people can listen to podcasts just by being on Apple, just by being on Index. Spotify, they have a pretty good listener base on their own. They don't index from anywhere. They don't put out their index to anywhere. But it's a might as well because it's very popular. Now, the whole idea here is be everywhere, but don't freak out about it. If, hey, I'm having trouble getting on Amazon. Well, nobody listens on Amazon. They might find your show there, but they probably don't use it to listen. But be everywhere as long as it's not a pain in the butt. I mean, seriously. People, I'm in tech support, so I will get a call or a text or an email or whatever saying, oh my gosh, I can't get in Amazon, or my episode's not on Amazon yet. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, well, yeah, so what? But, you want to be there. And but just don't overthink it. So many people worry about being on every single little platform, and good enough is good enough sometimes. There's a lot of quirks when it comes to certain apps. But like I said, don't worry too much. So Spotify, they got their own quirks and features. They're got a huge international reach. A lot of countries, Spotify is probably the number one or number two outside of the U.S. Apple's number one in the U.S. no matter what. But with Spotify, it does support video. It does not support video coming into it through RSS, because there is such a thing as an RSS-based video podcast. Apple does take that, and there's a lot of advantages for that, but there's some disadvantages to having video RSS. The files are huge. You're paying $20 a month for a hosting plan somewhere. You're not going to fit much video on that hosting plan. So, think about that. Bandwidth, if you're paying bandwidth for the server you're on, video's huge. Even figure you get 100 listeners, downloading a gigabyte of video, that's a lot of bandwidth. So it's not necessary to have video for that. But for distribution, you can get in, I think the last count was about 70 apps that support video. But Spotify in particular, the problem with that is if you upload one video to Spotify with the same title as your podcast, they will no longer pull your audio podcast into Spotify. And that's their rule, not ours. And so be really careful with that. If you want to do a Spotify video, and how many people out here have ever watched a video on Spotify? Well, there's a few. Good. But, in my circle of friends, I don't hear that very often. I actually have, because Rogan was exclusive to Spotify, so I did watch his videos once in a while. But, and then, like I said, if you upload that one video, your audio goes away. So, the elephant in the room, YouTube. It's a lot of YouTubers, and I know a couple out here that are YouTube first. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it's not necessarily a podcast. YouTube is not traditional podcasting. They do nothing with RSS when it comes to getting into YouTube. They will pull your audio in. If you're doing an audio channel only, not doing video, you can distribute that way. The videos are just a static image of your podcast image, and the audio plays. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to do a video channel on YouTube, do a video channel on YouTube, and then do your audio separately, and put that out as a traditional RSS-based podcast, and you get the best bang for, YouTube's the number 2 search engine. You want to find out something? A lot of people go to YouTube. They say, how do I do this? Or, so if you're there in one form or the other, but don't do both. That's the thing. If you're going to do audio, don't submit your audio to YouTube. Do your video on YouTube. Do your audio for everybody else. And just remember, you can't mow the lawn, wash the dishes, drive down the road, and watch a YouTube video. So here's some of the do's. Do the video, if you want to do video, not necessary, but do the video. Do it directly on YouTube. You just create a playlist, and it doesn't have to be called a podcast, but you have to specify it as a podcast in the system on YouTube, and then it'll get distributed to their audio platform, YouTube Music. So you don't have to do anything special to get audio on YouTube that way. And just create a separate audio. We went through that. The don'ts. Do not submit your RSS feed to YouTube if you do video. It looks garbagey. I didn't take a screenshot, but I do that with my show just to show why not to do that with my show. Is you got your video channel, and next to every episode, you're going to have a second version of that episode that is audio, and it's just going to have your logo on it. So every other video, it just garbages up your channel. So, and do not submit video RSS feed to YouTube, because they won't take it. They won't do anything with it. So if you're doing a regular RSS video podcast, don't submit that to YouTube. Just upload the videos to YouTube separately. And like I said, it's really hard to watch a YouTube video, mowing the lawn, driving down the road, all that stuff. You can tell I don't do this very often, right? So, but again, just cover your bases. Like I said, being in Pandora, Pandora, nobody I know listens to podcasts in Pandora as their primary place to listen to podcasts. They listen to it for music. But if they run across it, they're going to say, oh, hey, that's a podcast. Cool. I'm going to go subscribe an Apple podcast because that's what I use, or Overcast, or whatever. But it's, just, prioritize the ones, those three, Podcast Index, Apple, Spotify. Those are the three that are the most important. You'll get about 90% of your potential audience with just those three. And then all the rest of them are might as well. Why not? It's not much work to get on those. Of course, a lot of the podcast hosts have destinations for, every one of them. And that's good. So anyway, yeah, about 120 apps. I've got to look at my slide, but about 120 apps out there to listen to podcasts on, give or take. And there's probably some other ones in your niche. Look for those. That's another thing. If you're doing a business podcast, there might be an app for just business podcasts. There's some of those out there. Not a lot, but there's some out there. Oh, and another thing, I didn't put it on this in this presentation, but a while back there was a big thing where I'm going to do an individual app for my show. And I always ask people, I say, how many apps on your phone do you have for an individual show? Nobody. Okay? That's why you don't do that, and it's expensive. Now, if you have a network, we have some networks, they have an app for their entire network. That makes sense. A lot of radio stations do that as well. So say it's a radio group, say they got 5 or 6 radio stations, they'll build their own app for those 5 or 6 radio stations. Nothing wrong with that. But again, just get it out there, and even if people don't listen on the platforms you're submitting to, they will find your show that way. It's a really good way of discovering podcasts. So, all right. Well, I'm going to hang around for questions. I thought I'd go a little longer, but I probably went too fast. But if you guys have any questions, especially about YouTube and the big hype about video. You hear that a lot. Video podcast, video podcast, video podcast. Still 90% of podcasting is audio. And even if you do video, you can repurpose that content for audio and get a wider distribution. Like, I encourage YouTubers, if you want to reach as many people as you can, you do your YouTube just the way you do your YouTube, and then do audio as a supplement, and then say that in your show. Hey, if you want to listen to this instead of watch, here you go. We're everywhere podcasts are. That's the most powerful term in podcasting. You say that on your podcast because somebody might hear it accidentally. Okay? So if you say, find our podcast anywhere you can get a podcast, and you want to be as everywhere as you can. So anyway, with that, like I said, if you want to hang out over here for a little bit, I'll take questions.